Welcome to IDB, everyone. It is Andrew here. The Nintendo SNES Classic has just been released, and they have been hitting the market like crazy, and people have been snatching them up. Many pre-orders still have not even shipped, but Nintendo says that stock of this console will be far beyond what we saw for the NES Classic. This newer, updated version is for the Super Nintendo. It has 21 games, a ton of the great ones in here, including Super Mario World and the previously unreleased Star Fox 2. We were lucky enough to get our hands on one, so we're going to go through all of the features here that determine whether or not this is a good investment, why not just run an emulator on a Raspberry Pi, and how the games are, and really what sets us apart from using an actual SNES. Now, what I really like about what was included here is they include everything you need to get started. I remember when consoles would not include things like HDMI and other cables that you necessarily needed. They actually include two controllers, they include the console itself, they include HDMI cable, power cables, everything you need. So you don't really have to worry about providing any of those extra things. You don't have to worry about getting the second cable for your roommate or your friend to play with. All of that is included inside of the box. I will say that the power cord and the cable cords, the remote control cords, they're all a little bit on the shorter side, but all of that is not a deal breaker by any means. You can get a longer HDMI, you can get a longer micro USB. All of that is absolutely doable. The HDMI cable is pretty similar. It's a Nintendo branded cable. It's got Nintendo word marks on there, similar to what you've seen with the Nintendo Switch. Then we have the actual micro USB cable, nothing fancy here, just used to actually power the device with the included power brick that you can plug in. Then we have the SNES, the Super Nintendo itself, which is mainly just a shell with an emulator running inside of it. Then we have two controllers. Luckily, they are much longer than the 3-foot cables that came with the NES Classic, and they're even longer than the original Super Nintendo cables. They've gone from 6 feet to 8 feet with this classic rendition. The console itself is a pretty much spot-on image of what the actual Super Nintendo is like. On the left-hand side, you have a power switch that actually works, a reset button that's used to go back to the home screen and to reset the console. The eject button looks like it works, but it doesn't do anything because there's nothing to eject. Of course, the game slot on the top doesn't work either, and even the controller ports in the front are fake. There is this little kind of pull down thing, which is a little awkward, like why do we need this here? It's annoying that you have to ruin the aesthetics just to get to the controller ports, but I guess it's mainly done just to keep the look of the shell. On the back of it, we have a little grill just to let any air out, and then we have the HDMI and the micro USB port to power it up and to get it to your TV. The shell itself is everything. It's super lightweight because there's really not that much going on inside here. It's not that very much powerful of a console. They don't have to worry about future-proofing it because all the games are already built in. I can say that I was absolutely impressed with the controllers. You'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference between this and the original controllers. It's most likely that Nintendo straight up went to the molds of the original controllers to make these new ones. The bumpers on top, select and start, A, B, and X, Y, as well as the D-pad on the left-hand side. Again, the cord on these is a little bit longer. It's still short for some people. It's only 8 feet long compared to the 6 foot that came with the regular Super Nintendo, and much better than the 3-foot cable that came with the NES, but they're still definitely on the shorter side. You might want to pick up some wireless controllers, especially if you plan to play from your couch that's a little bit further away from your TV. Luckily, compared to other consoles, there's not a lot of setup in getting this going. It's literally as simple as plugging in the power, plugging in the HDMI, then going through a few screens of the actual setup process. There's no updates to install or other complicated networking that you have to do that you probably have to do with a PS4, Xbox, or even the Switch. Once you plug it in, simply choose your language. I prefer English. It seems to be the best one. The rest of them I don't really much understand. But then you're good. You can go through a few of the different controls at the top or swipe through all of the games here in the center. We talked about a few of these, but Kirby's Dream Course, Mega Man X, Star Fox, as well as the unreleased Star Fox 2 is in here. There is Super Mario Kart, which is one of my favorites. Along the top, we have the display options, which you can choose through. We have settings, which you can do things like my gameplay demo, which if it sits idle for a few minutes, it'll actually pop up with your gameplay. Unfortunately, it's anytime from your gameplay, so it could just be you sitting at a pause screen. The display options, you have CRT filter, which puts those scan lines on there. You have Pixel Perfect, which makes everything into actual little squares. And then just the standard display in the center. They're all pretty good, and you can simply just go through and choose the one that you feel looks best for you. The emulator here does a great job. I spotted no real odd artifacts. It feels like I'm really playing on a Super Nintendo. There's also a really neat feature here. Anyone who's used emulators a while before, they know you can have unlimited saves and rewind points and all that stuff. They do have a really cool way to suspend games and then jump forward and backward depending on what game it is. So you can go in and jump back 30 seconds, 40 seconds if you're playing something like Kirby, something like Final Fantasy, or where it's more drawn out, like longer gameplay times. Those you may have like 5 full minutes of time to jump through. So it's a really neat feature to be able to jump forward and backward in time, like right before you have a boss, right before you face a large enemy. Anything like that, you can go ahead and save it, go back in, and try it again. Or you can just use it as a suspension point. So anytime you hit the reset button to go back to your main screen, you'll see that little game floating around in that bottom left-hand corner. Simply pull down on it, you can put it into any of those 4 different suspend point lists, and it's good to go. They are all completely independent of one another, so you could have a save point from where you're playing with a friend, as well as one where you're playing solo. There's not much else to say other than get this console. If you can, it's an amazing bargain at $80, way less tinkery than setting up a Raspberry Pi, and hopefully in the future we'll even be able to go in and hack this thing and jailbreak it essentially and put on additional games rather than the 21 that are already included. Let us know what you think of the NES or Super NES Classic below in the comments, subscribe, and until next time, it's Andrew for IDB.